Justin Riley, welcome to Dirtbag Rich.
Thanks, Blake. Thanks for having me.
When someone asks you, what do you do? How do you respond to them?
Oh my goodness, that's probably one of the more complicated questions that I'm asked. Um, Currently, I throw kind of alternative culture partner dancing events in wilderness or wild spaces. And I also do some van and bus conversions, mobile solar stuff on the side. And I spent a good 15 years teaching partner dancing, specifically blues and fusion partner dance uh, throughout Europe and the States. And I spend a lot of my free time, if not all of it, with my friends in wilderness.
Okay, good. We're going to talk more about the wilderness a bit later, but first, for someone who has no idea what a partner dance event or weekend looks like, let alone some of the more extreme, like wilderness retreats that you've organized, maybe just walk people through a basic long weekend partner dance event that you have created in the past. Because you've done more than 100 of these, right?
Yeah, I've done nearly 200
Oh my
actually over the
gosh.
last. I know it used to be 12 a year. Now I'm back down to six, which feels a little more manageable. I guess each one is its own kind of creative expression of like how to get a group of um, fun-loving dancers uh, to do something ambitious together. I feel like each one has its own design. Like I throw a 5-day floating dance party down the Green River in Utah, where there's like a whole bunch of us getting together and we're loading boats, unloading, throwing parties on the sandbars, and like this idea of ambition for the group with a design that requires everyone to participate and show up. And even my week long events that are just at a rented property up in the mountains kind of have the same, like an artistic vision where we might change dance venues multiple times within a night. And it kind of requires that everyone that shows up participates. People work volunteer shifts. Every single person works at least one shift. Most people find that it's the most fun part of the entire weekend and work two or three, and just this like general feeling of like we're creating this space in this event rather than Justin the organizer is. And then we dance until sunrise, sometimes multiple nights in a row, workshops during the day, sometimes like more adventure activities like climbing and canyoneering if it's in one of more my wild wilderness spaces. And yeah, but I think really what brings them all together is an artistic vision that requires everybody to make it happen or it falls apart. And that way everyone shows up and feels a part of it. No one's left out.
The first time I went to one of your events was in 2016 in California. And the artistic vision part stood out to me immediately because there was all of these little tiny outdoor dance venues that the group had created with extremely picturesque lighting. So like the trees were lit up with different colors late at night. The DJ booths were very artistically done. And you seem to have a special knack for finding like cool old furniture. You know what I mean? Like plush chairs and like cool lighting fixtures, and like you do like string lights and just lighting in general very well. Uh, what was your influence for even beginning to conceive of creating events like this, Justin?
I mean, I think the aesthetic specifically is Victorian trash that you're looking for.
Thank you.
um, I was a dancer ever since I was in high school. I found it in the late '90s, growing up in Lawrence, Kansas, and in the kind of swing and Lindy Hop big band kind of resurgence of swing dancing. And it was before the styles of dance that I'm currently involved in existed on this scale, and it just kind of, these dances came out of an underground house party scene of Lindy Hoppers that after the big ballrooms closed down, they would go out and dance at house parties like normal people. And the I always felt a little outside of the community at large. I always loved dancing, but I grew up from a pretty progressive Jewish family in Kansas, and the dance community was pretty socially conservative. Uh, and I always resonated with the dance and the movement and less with the culture and community. And I really, my inspiration to first start my events, which my first like festival was in 2006, was that I was more of an outside kid, wilderness junkie, a little bit more of a dirtbag. At the time, I was camping on a friend's property up on Mount Sopris outside of Carbondale, Colorado, uh, working for a CSA and growing food and just spending time in the wilderness and then dancing. And I was like, I want to create a space where my wilderness friends would really enjoy it and would get into dance, and where my dancing friends would be in a space and aesthetic that I was more akin to. And it was a weekend of hot springing, dancing under the stars, busking, dancing while we were like busking for money in Aspen up on the pedestrian mall in Aspen, Colorado, and buying pizza with the money we made, and just like doing this type of lifestyle that was more akin to what I was used to, but with my dance community. And it was really just wanting to bring create a space that I felt like I fit in, and that was mine in while dancing. And then that was turned into one event, two events, and then it became a full time gig.
Have you ever had a normal job?
I am. I have never had a normal job. I was thinking about this actually not too long ago. When I was in high school, I painted apartments for like 2 weeks over the summer. I think that's maybe the only boss I've ever had in my entire life, which I'm 40 now, so that's
Good track record.
yeah, who knows? There's always time to do something different, I guess.
The way you paint your kind of early existence, it sounds a bit like a crust punk kind of existence to me, like a traveler really living on very little money, coming together to find community and to create like magical experiences. Uh, but really living on like the edge of financial insecurity. Is that does that accurately portray your maybe early 20s?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you asked Justin at 21, he would not think that he was without resources, but I definitely was in retrospect. I spent, after college, I went to a small liberal arts school in Iowa, Grinnell College, and I just took a one-way ticket to Quito, Ecuador, with $3,000 of savings, and honestly somehow made that last an entire year down there. And a lot of it was what I used to call urban camping, which was really just being homeless on the street in cities. And it's funny when I look back, I'm like, wow, I was just a kid doing like hitchhiking everywhere. Just like really the things I would do for fun was just get a bottle of wine and go sit on the street and talk to street artisans as opposed to going to bars. And actually, from the age of 21 till probably 25 or 26, I was living off of $4,000 to $6,000 a year. And during those years, I would go back to Colorado. I'd work the summer season, the summer growing season, growing food and gardening for 3 months. Honestly, the best thing about gardening in a mountain community all above 8,000 feet is that the growing season's 100 days. And then when that was over, I'd take off and travel, go to Latin America, go backpacking, and just, yeah. Uh, and also like down south in in this South and Central America, I'd always get linked up with social justice movements and was really, trying to build myself as a photographer and a journalist, but also as like a street activist, and always got linked up with communities that had a lot to offer me and showed up for them, and just got plugged into ways of living a very uh, exuberant life without needing a whole lot of financial resources.
So you made money from doing agriculture. And did the journalism or the photography pay any money? Like, how did you make this $4,000 to $6,000? Was it really just this the summer, like work intensively for a few months and then live off that for the rest of the year?
It would depend on the year. In my early 20s, it's funny to reflect on this because it feels so long ago. Like I really wanted to be a journalist, and specifically a photojournalist. And I had a photo blog. I eventually got a new job at the Argentimes in Buenos Aires, and would just be I would follow around these current events that were happening. Like I was in Cuba for Castro's resignation. I went and got connected with the elections and was an international election observer and organizer in 2007 for the elections of Mauricio Funes in El Salvador. And every winter I would have a project that would go and like kind of cover as a journalist and then write pieces for like NACLA, like North American Congress for Latin America, or Upside Down World. These were like the days of like the magazines and the online blogs,
Yeah.
right? An online magazine time. And I would make some money, but then I would also go and shoot a wedding for like a friend of mine and make more money in a weekend than I had in like 3 months of covering uh, this project for a newspaper for an article. And then I would come and probably make 2/3 of my income over the summer in Colorado. So really just piecing it together. But I would say like the thing that was most important in that wasn't that, and this was even going further from my 20s, is not just I was able to make like decent money in a short amount of time, but that I was like able and willing to live off of like nothing for an extended amount of time. And
Yeah,
I feel
tell me
like
how
that
you
was
are different from other people in that regard, because there's lots of people who are able to bum around for a while in their 20s, but it starts to feel uncomfortable, or their friends start to make more money, and so they kind of feel like they don't belong anymore. They can't participate in social activities. And so, what was the secret to you being able to do this for so long?
um well, I think I still like while I make quite a bit more money than I did in my early 20s, um, I still don't feel like I need a lot uh, to have a really rich, beautiful life. Like my activities are like ski mountaineering and climbing and backpacking. They're all things that don't really require a lot of inputs, except for maybe the gear that I bought previously to do them. And in my 20s, it was more like running and backpacking. So it was even cheaper than the activities I'm into now. And, in large part, just, maybe it's my tastes to where like I don't get a whole lot going out to a 5-star Michelin restaurant. I'd rather go on a walk with a friend than go shopping, and just liking things that are used and salvaged and fixing things myself, like building the relationship with things that isn't just money. I think a lot of when I look at like what life has to offer, it's like it's all relational. And whether that's our friend relationships, a relationship to place, but also relationship to things. People are like, how do you learn all of these things with car mechanics? I'm like, well, I had things broken down. I had old cars for decades, and when something breaks, got to figure it out. And what happens when your car breaks down and you have to figure it out, and you have like a deeper relationship to your vehicle, to the day, to the person that picks you up on the side of the road and takes you to the nearest gas station for a phone call. I mean, like builds this richness of relationship other than just now I sit and I call AAA and they come and get me, and my relationship is with the tow truck driver, but and it's relationship to that I purchased this insurance and that I will pay someone to do it. And in a way, it's way less rich when the relationship is financial and transactional
Hmm.
rather than I got to figure it out with all the things available.
So you derive a sense of purpose or even adventure from figuring out stuff that other people will pay to solve.
Yeah, and I think in my earlier days, I had more time and less money. And so the things, of course, I spent my time to figure it out because I didn't have money. And now there's a lot of things that I would have done on my vehicle, just use that same example for repairs that I definitely pay someone to do because I'm too busy or I'd rather be doing something else. But um, but yeah, and that's just the just the shifting, like just being self-aware that with the resources to pay for things like um, mechanics, like I am losing that relationship to my vehicles, but hopefully I'm putting it somewhere else.
So, at what point did you become incredibly financially wealthy thanks to these massive dance events that you kept producing? When did your finances start to tip in the
Oh my
upward
gosh.
direction from your true dirtbag status in your early to mid 20s?
That's hilarious. It's probably been about 10 years that I haven't been like that I've been the one that, like, oh yeah, like I can, like I'd be the one that's sorry, yeah, that I have the resources, like be more generous in larger ways, like offer friends loans and things like that. Um, and I think it really was just that, like, I still am able to live off of very little. And as you gain more time and experience, people pay you more for your labor and the things that you do that have value in the world, and you just start to make more money and never really quite needed that much more. And also, I think just being wise with my savings. I think that there's something that a lot of people who don't come from wealth, like myself, or that are living alternative lifestyles, there's like a rejection of things like investing um, and or debt and credit card debt, and having like a financial wisdom with very little is something like really important. I feel like I got that from my mom. They were both public school teachers in rural Kansas where I was growing up as a kid, and we did so much on so little. Like all summer, we just live off of a 0% credit card that my mom would open, so we could travel all summer together as a family. Camping everywhere we went, maybe a hotel every 2 weeks for a shower, and just really valuing experiences over things was like my mom's mantra, and just doing a lot. Like I did so much more as a family growing up than uh, like most all of my other friends, even though I was the poor kid. And yeah, like I feel like I really learned that, oh, like you can do a lot off of nothing as long as you make the right priorities and decisions.
Hmm. So I think I can guess based upon what you said about both your parents being public school teachers, but your life of travel and adventure has not been enabled by generational wealth or some sort of trust fund or an expected inheritance, right?
Definitely not. That is that is you're absolutely correct in that.
So I want to come back to dance here because you were talking about the activities that you enjoy that are relational, that don't cost much money. And I think that partner dance is a wonderful example of this. Although, if you're in the US or you're in Europe and you look at these events like you have organized or your friends have organized, events that I like to go to, it doesn't seem like something that's super cheap. You look at a weekend event and it costs a couple $100s, maybe more, and then you need to pay for housing. Also, you need to travel to get there. And so I think it would be very easy for someone from the outside to look and say, people who do these dance weekends, it's a rich people thing because you need to have $500 or $600 in order to go take this weekend long vacation. And you do this all the time. So how do you respond to that? And what for you makes dance feel like this accessible form of relational connecting?
Yeah, I mean the that's a great question. The and as like the specific type of partner dancing that I'm a part of with blues and fusion has changed. Like I think that it started as an underground house party scene where there was no entrance. There wasn't even a name to it. People just called it the house party scene. And like I mentioned, we were all Lindy Hoppers just throwing after hours parties in our houses. And it was really it was a lot of people that couldn't afford even like the $8, $10 to go dance at the ballroom would just go to the house parties. And now it's quite different. I feel like while there is a movement still of people throwing house parties, you know, it costs money to go to these events. There's venues all around the world and all around the country that that costs money, and you gotta pay the venue, pay the organizer, pay the DJs, live acts, bands. But it is a thing that really, I feel like, with partner dancing or dancing in general, like just an important cultural piece for us as humans. That if you go to Latin America, like everyone grows up dancing, whether it's cumbia or bachata, salsa. Like everyone grows up dancing with their family and brothers and sisters in the house, and you don't have to pay to go take a dance class. And it's not a thing that you do with hobbies. Where I feel like here, growing up as like a Euro American, there's when I was growing up and I wanted music in my life, my parents like got me piano lessons. I went to band in school, or when I wanted dance, I'd go pay for a dance class. Where I feel like most of the world, like when there's not resources, financial resources, like everyone still has music and dance and food, but they cook and they dance with their friends at home and they play music because their relationship isn't through the purchasing of it, it's through the doing of it. And it's this really rich thing that I feel like, as a Euro American coming, not from riches, but from resources to like pay for dance classes as a kid, that our idea of culture is more consumptive and hobbies instead of just what we do with ourselves while we're in community. So as a centerpiece of my events, like I really do try to bring it back to that. Like, this is how we are in community. This is how we do things. This is like a holistic in every direction of how we are together. And that includes the good lighting. It includes the way we are together, that we sit and eat every meal together, that we build the spaces together. And the spaces that I create really do strive to be different than the other ones in the dance community, because I like to go and just pay a ticket and be like, great, I'm going to have a fun evening of dancing. But there's something really special to go and be needed in the space to help out. And then I get to feel a part of it. And like it's mine, since I put my labor and attention to it and not just showed up.
And
So
your events are residential also. People are staying at the same place where they're dancing. And often they're staying in some sort of almost summer camp like communal environment, dormitories, sharing beds, sleeping in weird makeshift configurations. And I think that definitely adds to the magic and the value of the experience. It's quite different when you kind of leave the social dance and then you go out and you're back in the city and you kind of walk back to your Airbnb or your friend's place maybe, and there's this disconnection. Does the residential aspect, has that always been key to your events?
100%. I am unwilling to throw one that's not a residential event because of that exact same effect that you mentioned, where people don't have investment in the space or the people or what's going on in the same way when they leave, and it kind of breaks the container every time people go home or go out to eat in a different restaurant. Where as opposed, everyone shows up for dinner time and sits and eats together, and then there's announcements about what's going on, and there's like this kind of like everyone sees each other. There's this like general feeling of yes to the group and what's happening is really powerful. And I feel like as adults, we rarely get it. Like as kids with summer camp, like you mentioned, like there's this feeling of like, wow, we're like all here a part of something together. And it's pretty rare as adults to have that. But yeah, residential events is like a cornerstone of the pedagogy and design of my events.
Okay, we've talked about the residential aspect, the outdoor aspect, the Victorian junk aspect, and the participative, everyone volunteers. We co-create this part. But I still feel like there's something else, which is in the magic. There's something you're putting into the water, Justin. And can you put your finger on this? Like when you compare yourself to other people who are throwing cool events, cool retreats, and you're thinking like, but they don't have that Justin Riley magic. What is it? I want you to toot your horn a little bit here, please.
I think the biggest thing is like, I'm not in the service industry. I'm an artist. when I do my work. It's like when people come up like, oh, like I'd really like this. And I'm like, I didn't ask your opinion about my art. It's like often my response. It's like, I invited you into my space and I wanted you to be a part of it. And, I feel like a lot of organizers are like, they're trying to make everyone happy. They're trying to provide a service, which is super important. Where I'm trying to create like an experience, right? That isn't necessarily easy. That's like trying to hit certain edges. And I myself am like a very sensitive person. Like I kind of feel everything in the space. And if like the lighting's not good, like I feel it and I change it. And I'm making the party and the event for myself. So, uh, I'm not just changing the lighting because I want the lighting to be good, but because it's like I need it to like really drop into the space. Or if the music's off from like I select every DJ, like the lighting design, like um, it's a fully controlled container, I guess I like to say, where whatever is going to happen is free to happen inside of it. But the container holding that I like to do is like a really specific one, and it's cultural as well. Like I keep mentioning the meals together, and that's announcement time, and it really sets the culture of how we are together. And for a lot of years, like for the first few years of building these events, it took a lot of like work to build the cultural quorum of the space, or just the norms of it. But for the last decade, like the people that come to my events have been to a lot of them. They know how we are together in them and how the culture is held, and everyone holds the cultural space. I feel like, in the most part, I don't even have to be there, and um, the space is held because there's a cultural quorum, which is, we're always held by a cultural quorum, whether we're in a church space, in a park. It's like we know these silent ways of being and we all enforce them. And the same thing's happening in the spaces. And so I kind of feel myself, rather than in the service industry, as more like a cultural architect and a space and experience architect, an artist. And you won't see any like surveys about how you felt about the event or what you would like to have changed at my spaces. And often when people write and ask me, I would say like more times than not, when someone tells me they would like something changed about the space, I usually like, oh my gosh, do you know what a great event is for that? And I offer up other great events in the community, that I think are, a better fit than the one that they are, than they're at. Oh man.
So I'm hearing you talk a lot about collaboration and co-creation, and also you use the word control. And you said, this is my project. I'm not really asking for feedback. And
Oh
so
man.
you must get some pushback. You must get some criticism, for doing things so specifically the way you want them done. So what do your critics say? And maybe they just don't show up. That's the way they protest. But when you do have people who are a bit critical of how you run your events, what do they typically say?
There's of course a number of critiques about my spaces, and there's ones that are material, like the dance floor wasn't a perfect hardwood dance floor. There's ones about, there aren't as many showers as they would like at the event space. And I think I received more early on when I was trying to make the events, or I was trying to convince people to come to the events. Currently, like if you go to my website and read about it, every event is very specific that this event is not for everyone and it's not designed for everyone. And if you don't see these events and hear about them and think, thank God, this is exactly what I've been wanting, you probably shouldn't be here. And I think the anti-promotion has both made it to where the right people show up and more people show up. And I actually hear very, like the last probably 4 years since I've really changed how I've been trying to promote and get people at the event. And it's more of an anti-promotion of like, if this isn't exactly what you've been wanting, it's not for you. And and I hear very few critiques now because the people show up that really want the thing. And what I really do like is when someone lets me know how they're affected. So if someone's like, today was really long and I didn't feel like it was like the dinner crew had enough energy or enough help to make dinner happen and we felt burned out, like that I absolutely want to know. That's the feedback that I'm like, oh my goodness, we need to change everything and respond a lot to. And which is different than the music, the lighting, like the flow of the event and programming like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of critiques that I honestly feel like they are the same type of critiques that you would hear suburban, more socially conservative, risk adverse America make about probably any of the people that you're interviewing on this podcast series. They're the critiques of um, people that want things to feel safer and be less ambitious, that want things to be more known, more controlled, and less like chaos art of like how we figure things out together when the unknown happens. There's one of my favorite kind of pedagogical uses in my spaces is like high risk, low consequence. If this is like a ski mountaineering and like wilderness speak that I use a lot in my productions, where like if there's no risk involved, nothing interesting will happen. And
Mm-hmm.
like risk and things not going as planned is what makes something interesting and alive and real. Like there's a rawness of like what it necessitates out of everyone to adapt and figure out how it's going to work. And so the higher the risk, the better for my spaces. And I'll intentionally create it to where it's there's more risk and more difficulty than it needed to be, but the consequence for me needs to be low. So like the floating dance festival I refer to that I throw every year, like there's so much like the risk is it's a wild space, we're like sometimes 50 boats tied together going down the river and a wind comes up and getting blown into the shore and the risk is super high, but the consequence is that people get wet. Maybe we like put a hole in a boat. Like it's a low risk because it's flat water. Where, in like my ski mountaineering, like we might look at a ski line that has it might be a very low risk of an avalanche slide, but the consequence is like ultimate consequences of death, and I would never touch that. So, you
I,
know,
I do recall being on the Green River dance trip in 2019, and a number of people had brought essentially pool toys they had purchased off Amazon 2 days prior, and many of these floating craft did not make it past day two, and so we ended up in a sort of like refugee boat situation where people were clambering onto other people's boats, and I think there was a cake of beer also on the first day that was attached to the dome floating down that somehow got detached and is now sitting at the bottom of the Green River. So there was all sorts of like small disasters, but overall, like it worked. Somehow it worked. The water was purified each day, so we had drinkable water and water to clean the dishes. Stuff was loaded and unloaded, and even though people were tired, dance parties happened every evening, and like no one was left behind. There was no major first aid incidents. But it did feel to me as a fellow wilderness person, Justin, it felt to me like you were pulling it off just on like the edge, just on the edge of like everything being okay, and that theoretically something could have happened that tipped it over into the realm of not being okay. But at every event I've been to that you've produced, that has not yet happened. So how do you know where that edge is? How do you feel that? I feel like that's part of the je ne sais quoi here.
yeah, and I think a lot of it is just risk assessment. Like I think that my like wilderness endeavors are like not separate from like how I make decisions. And to say also, like that first year on the river trip you were on was probably the most chaotic event I've ever thrown of the 180. It was I don't know if you remember, we were in a flood state and I was going to cancel it, but the people at the BLM river office assured me it would be fine. And I feel like it was fine outside of that we were trying to float a geodesic dome down the river. I think that was the only part that was less fine. That part we probably should have nixed, which we did on day 2, but you should have nixed from the beginning. But there is I mean, I don't know if just from this last river trip, like there's all sorts of things that make something dangerous or something risky, and like there's like on the river, I think that's a great example of that event specifically. Like there's all these things that have a lot of risk, like we might like risk food spoiling the coolers. We might risk that like a strong crosswind comes in and like pushes us into like a rocky shore. But the danger is if people don't have their life jackets within arm's reach, right? Where like as a river guide, as a whitewater rafting guide, like the fact that you have life jackets makes like very dangerous water just a lot of fun to go down. And there's this thing, if you remember on that trip, while it was really hard, like people came together to support each other because it was necessary. And that's probably, of all of the events that I've thrown, that is the event specifically that had probably the most need to come together in a like difficult situation because the water was flowing at about 4 times what it would otherwise. It was at a 100-year flood state, and it was still flat, just a little faster, and the river was really different. And also, I don't know if you remember, when I saw that, I reserved 2 other gear boats as our insurance policy boats, because I knew that like the highest risk was that people were going to pop their boats, because instead of sandy beaches on the shore, it was the tops of trees. And as people were bringing all sorts of crafts, like some from Walmart, I was like, we need to have some backups. And oh my goodness, I'm so glad we did. Like the highest risk was that people's boats popped and they got put on the refugee boats, which happened to like almost the entire event. And the consequence of like someone getting hurt, other than the dome, which was quite complicated to get that stopped and brought down, I feel like people, like we could have been in the water in our life jackets the entire time for all 56 miles, and it would have been a fun float. But everyone's like, oh my gosh, like I might almost flew in, like oh my gosh, we're sinking, like there's this like, and then everyone's like helping each other, coming together, like there's this idea of emergency where really like we were also in the water swimming during the day, like in the water. And I kind of love this like the high risk, low consequence is just a sweet spot. It like really brings people together. It brings creativity and aliveness in a space. It makes it to where like I can try and plan everything of like what type of like charisma comes out of a time together with people. And I can't ever anticipate it because everyone's creativity is needed. And I'm always impressed. It's always fun. It's always interesting. And it even helps my like need for novelty and running the same event year after year.
It's very real. And I think just putting people into a situation where they have to come together, hopefully not to like survive, but in order, they realize that either they are going to participate in creating this experience or it's going to be a bad experience. These kinds of situations are fewer and fewer. There's a much more commercial and transactional relationship that's expected, which is I give you money, you provide amazing experience, and don't ask me to actually do anything that could be uncomfortable for more than a microsecond. So the fact that you continue organizing, I mean, of course, like you said, that was an exceptional event, but you continue organizing these events where you just expect that people show up and get off their butts and actually do something and solve problems on their own might be the secret sauce, Justin.
People do say that my superpower is I trust people. And I think I really do trust people. Like I put people in charge. I trust them to do it. I trust them to figure it out. And I trust people to like ask for support if they need help. And I think having a container of this is your project. If you need anything, ask. And then it works. And then
Hmm.
also having like a lot of people that I trust that have been to a lot of events or on my crew so that I'm not the only one they're asking. Like, and
Hmm.
then after so many events, like there's almost 20 years of culture in my events, and there's such a capacity that's been built. And like a lot of my politics are also around capacity building, where like how did I learn to do the things that I do? I just did it, and people trusted me to figure out how to use power tools for the first time. And we gotta trust each other so people can learn, and it opens up the capacity of the group, and then all of a sudden the group has a huge capacity going forward. And we don't need to like pay for expensive um, school. Like I think like the unschooling that you do as well probably hinges a lot on those same values of like trust people to figure it out, support them when needed, but otherwise like if you don't trust them, they'll never figure it out and learn, and they'll never have the confidence to take it forward.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought it there. Let's zoom out for a moment here and talk about time, money, and purpose. Let's just start with the first two. How do you think about balancing time and money in your life? And perhaps tell me, how much free time do you actually enjoy on a day to day, week to week, month to month basis?
Oh my goodness. It really depends. I feel like I'm a full speed ahead and then a stop, full stop. So like just like the last 6 months, I'll go on production tour for 5 weeks. I've got my crew. We're on our tour vehicle. We are just like full on. And then afterwards, I'll have a month off. And I'll just like go to the wilderness, go to the mountains, go climb, go hike, uh, go spend time on the river. Um, I don't, it's hard to really, I know that we had talked about this earlier before we hit the record button about free time. And when you ask me about that, I'm like, wow, I don't actually see myself as giving my time to things that I make that's like is work. Like, I don't, all of the projects that I do, I would do for free. And many of them pay for me to live my life, and also be generous on top of that. So, um, yeah, like these events, like some of the events cost money, some of them do really well. And I have to go into them knowing that I would do it even if it was something that I was paying for out of pocket. And I feel like with my dance teaching as well, um, for a decade, like I often would just say yes to whatever the event made and could offer me. And sometimes that was a lot, and sometimes it was a little. And just like trusting that like it's gonna work out, and also like making all of like the big moves and deliberate decisions so that it does financially work out. But yeah, I feel like my whole life is filled with free time. Um, I I work kind of 5 weekends a year, but then I'm also always just doing things that are probably in the same line of work, like throwing events and parties and teaching dance that I just do as a gift to the community and the people around me. I don't know if that was sidestepping your question, but
No, no, no. It's complicated. It's complicated when you really enjoy what you're doing. Like teaching dance is something you clearly enjoy, and so this is where we bring in the meaning aspect to it. Let me just throw one big question at you. Like, how do you know that you are doing something important with the work that you're doing? Are
man,
you convinced?
that's a great question. Actually, can I say one more thing to your last question
Please.
before we move on? Um, I think when I reflect on like what the difference between free time and work maybe would be the other end of that spectrum, even though you didn't give it a name, is like whether or not like we feel like we have ownership of our own labor and time.
Hmm.
And this is like certainly like a Marxist perspective and very anti-capitalist and worker-centered. But like when we like our labor is all we have. Like it's our time and what we put our time towards. And it can, and what we do with it is like we cook food for a good friend. It's like how we fall in love. It's how we build houses to like for our family to house our families. Like it's what we give as our greatest gift. And I think in a late stage capitalist society, when the exchange is for money, when like you cook food because you work in a restaurant for your boss, or you a contractor and you build a house for someone that's like a corporation to build an apartment complex, and we're separate from the value of our labor, and our labor is something that's no longer ours. We're dissociated and separate from it. And that's something that I've always, from the very beginning, like growing up as like an anti-capitalist, anarchist, politic punk, like being very self-aware of like not selling my labor. It doesn't mean that I don't do things for money all the time, but making sure that like I feel like I have agency in my control of it. Because that's the thing that makes it the biggest gift is like cooking for our families or a lover, or your job in the back of a restaurant. That makes it something that you're just counting the hours till you're done, or something that you look forward to when you get home. And like, so that is a big thing. Like free time is like whether or not we have agency and control of our labor, and work might be that we're selling our time and labor and it belongs to someone else because they're paying us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might be why I'm have a harder time answering that question, because I don't feel like I feel really fortunate and really loyal to myself and stubborn that like I don't really do anything to to sell myself. It's
You were not
also when I
alienated from your labor.
yeah, like even to my answer of when people come to me wanting something to shift in the space, if it's not something I care about, then I say like maybe this isn't the space for you. I don't work for you, but I invited you into my space and like invited you into this. But you know, of course, the values are robust. If they aren't having a good time and they feel, then I like really do care about that.
That's a good clarification, Justin. And now I'll boomerang it back to you. Do you think you're having an impact? Do you think you're doing something meaningful and important in the world? And let's focus on the dance events and the dance teaching. And if so, how do you know?
You know, that's a good question. I feel like I'm quite the cynic, and I do believe that celebration is something that is so important to us and that we lack here in America in a big way. And the global north, like we've lost the capacity to like feel like we're allowed to celebrate in a lot of ways, and that you know, parties and events are celebratory and they're important. And when people come to me about the events, like it, I really do see that I'm like lives are being completely shifted through them. This event that I just threw on Lake Powell, it was like a week-long party with 3 houseboats. Like every single person at the closing circle was like, this was the best week of my year to the best week that I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm here being like, this was a really special week. And like, what is it? Like, I don't know the impact. I feel like it's well beyond me. Like, I've had more people than I can count come and tell me that my spaces and events like saved their life, in terms of like on a like a very material way, and then like feeling lost and suicidal, and then finding the community and spaces. But I don't actually give my like I don't think I'm the one doing that. Like, you know, that's like people are all in the space kind of crashing into each other in these poetic ways, and with a space that feels messy enough that includes everybody. You know, I often also say that in my spaces, like they're deliberately messy because when they're messy, we all fit. And if they're held rigidly and tightly, then none of us fit, even myself. And so I do think in holding a very deliberately messy space, which is kind of like a bar. You go into a bar, it's a messy space, right? You go to like Latin America, any cultural event in the street is messy. And I think here we try to have our parties be very crisp and clean in like your American buy a ticket to something America. And, you know, I think we lose a lot. So I think in bringing those spaces into the community is important. I mean, I think that my events are very much based on liberation politics, around like how we like as a baseline just treat each other better than we would otherwise. And And also wilderness, nature, fun, dance, connection, good food, falling in love. Like it's all the mess that makes things valuable.
Yeah.
So, I think I am having an impact. Um, but I think on a more selfish level, it's like it's not necessarily why I do it. Like I do it for myself, and I think it's also why I keep doing it. When I watch organizers in the community that burn out all the time, like I am the organizer that's been doing not only the most events, but has been doing it for the longest of anywhere in the world in the global blues and fusion community. And it's because like I do it for myself. I want a community that feels this way. I want spaces that feel this way. I need the lighting to be good to have a good time. And I want to be in wild spaces. And I would do it even if I wasn't getting paid.
Yeah, I really sympathize with this. The travel programs for unschooled teenagers that I've been running for more than 15 years. Uh, I just go to places that I want to go to. I organize trips to places I'm excited for and that my co-leaders are excited for because that is communicated through us, through our body language, through, you know, especially teenagers, just children in general, they can tell if an adult actually wants to be there or not. But I'm sure this goes for dance events too. They can tell if the organizer is personally psyched and invested to make this thing happen, or if it feels like it's some sort of obligation. Um, so, yeah, keeping that creator, I don't know what to call it here, buy-in alive seems so non-negotiable if you're going to do this for the long run.
100%. Yeah, I think I can really see how that is in your line of work as well. And yeah, the kids, like everyone feels the body and like the somaticness of the person that's the center of it. And if they're burned out and having a good time, like everyone, like we're so sensitive as animals. Like we
Mm-hmm.
take on so much more than we give credit for, and people will wonder why they're not having a good time. And maybe it's because the lighting's bad or the music's the sound's off, but like in large part, it's because whoever's holding the space, right? Like the people that are like culturally centering it, like aren't doing well. And if they're doing well, you could probably be hanging out in a Walmart parking lot with your kids on your
Mm-hmm.
unschooling. And if you're having a good time because of whatever reason, so are they.
Yeah, it's very true. Um, I want to talk about the other source of meaning in your life, the one that I'm aware of, which is wilderness and nature and doing cool stuff in the outdoors. And we've spent a lot of time talking about dance, but I know that a big part of your life is dedicated to wilderness. And can you just talk about like what would be missing from your life if you were not able to go on wilderness trips? Like what bucket is being filled by these adventures that you take in your free time?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if would make it. I don't know if I could do anything else with my life if I didn't have my wilderness time. Uh, yeah, like as someone like I've been on the road for over 20 years, and like my return to home is like with a backpack on, just like exploring the canyons and the mountains of the world. And yeah, just like a deep relationship to space and source and myself. And I think it's also a nice counterbalance to the hyper social community centeredness of
Mm-hmm.
my work. Um, I think if anyone saw me teaching at a dance event or producing one, probably it was in a city near a mountain range. And probably the best bet is I spent my 4 days off between events backpacking or hiking in the Alps or in the Rockies. And I was back down for another event. And yeah, just like and keeping my body just engaged in ways that feel inspired. I know everyone has their own wilderness, right? That they like are constantly oriented towards, and the thing that kind of brings them back into themselves, even when everything feels confusing and hard and not aligned. And yeah, I just feel really lucky to have one that's so accessible.
Tell me about a few specific trips that you've been on. I can give you a constraint if you want in the last decade, or just ones that stand out as like extremely notable.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the funny thing is, like, similar to the river trip, that we were just mentioning that you were on, the first year, like I've done it for 5 years now. The only one anyone story tells about is that one because there was the most misadventure. And every event was like flawless and amazing, and boats didn't pop, and it was just so dialed in this way where everyone only story tells about the first year because of like the wildness of it and how things didn't go as planned. And I feel like that's similar in the wilderness realm as well. Like the only ones that like we ever end up storytelling about are the things that didn't go as planned. And yeah, the last 6 or 7 years, I've been getting really into ski mountaineering. I've always been a skier, but um, my adventure buddy Serge out of Boulder, Colorado, him and I were old college buddies, and we'd always organize our entire winters for really, yeah, almost the last decade, to be honest, to have a big, ambitious spring ski traverse. We did a few years in the Wind River Range, 180 miles north to south across the whole range, and multiple summer trips to figure out the route. And then, we failed on our first attempt because 4 days in, a storm mid-May that was forecast at 5 inches was 5 feet, and we were in a whiteout room skiing, holding hands at 13,000 feet for 36 hours as we're like trying to like figure our way out of the range safely as we bailed out with a 3-day bailout. Or 2 springs ago, my buddy Serge and I were doing a similarly ambitious, well, a similar spring trip, but in the Sierras. It was going to be about 200 miles and 3 weeks on skis, and a warm spell, like on April 20th, came in that was unseasonable, and it was a historic snowpack in the Southern Sierra, and entire mountainsides were coming down. We got stuck in the range for days, and really one of the most wild experiences of my life. And it was when things didn't go as planned, and we were forced to make decisions on where we would go and how things would change, and to stay safe out there because of like the unseasonably warm snow conditions that were bringing down wet slides. We couldn't get to our food caches and spent 5 days with no food, doing 20-mile plus days on skis with mountains coming with, historically bloomed rivers, like entire forests that were like leveled from avalanches from that season because it was the largest recorded snow pack in Southern Sierra history. And yeah, it was 5 days of skiing every single available minute of daylight, plus by headlamp with no food. It was like it was an epic. But really, it's just the storytelling are the ones that when things don't go as planned is when it gets really rich. It's what we remember, and it's honestly like what, and that had more danger than like our risk. Like our risk assessment was good, but like when conditions change, like you have to make sure that you change as well to keep yourself safe and everything. And that's like that adaptability also that I was talking about. And our risk exposure was well above what we had ever set out to do, despite all of our changes of the trip. And and feel lucky to be here from it. And I've actually gotten really into climbing and whitewater rafting more since that.
So some nice, safer choices.
Totally. Yes. But yeah, that is like definitely, the storytelling is always the one that goes the most awry. The ones that are just like beautiful trips in the Alps between small villages or like, those aren't good for storytelling.
Well, I'm going to try to draw something out of you here with my next to last question. Tell me about a moment of like beauty or meaning or transcendence, something that's quieter than the whiteout in the snowstorm. Something that it could be from the dance world, it could be from the wilderness world, it could just be from your more day-to-day existence. But I'm still curious, Justin, where your source of meaning comes from. And so maybe give me a quieter moment to put a cap on this.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for that question, Blake. Um, I think that as life goes, like I've been doing a lot of reflecting this year. Um, that life just isn't what it was advertised as kids. I feel like this whole thing it's been more beautiful and more difficult than it was ever told that it was supposed to be as we were kids and being told what to expect and work towards. And yeah, like this last year, I think particularly has been like one of the most difficult ones of my life, in most part because of a separation with my partner in January. And it's like really brought me into myself, into my relationship with Source, and like having a commitment to something that's feels even more stable than like a partnership and community and best friends and purpose. Um, and, at the age of 40, um, it's felt like a really valuable gift, that like hard times from heartbreak get to bring me into. And yeah, like a lot, like I share a lot of seated moments, mostly with the sunrises, the sunsets, and the moon. Um, and like those moments are like really almost just like an umbilical cord to the center of the earth, and meaning um, they are important in like holding everything else that I'm trying to do here in my day to day.
Hmm.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
asking.
yeah, yeah.
But
And
but I think in past parts of my life, like that would have been at a protest. It would have been at throwing an event. It would have been, with a loved one, on a date, like things like that, which I still feel, of course. But it's nice to have like beauty and like that richness of connection be in like every direction, as it scaffoldings out from hardship.
yeah, I would be remiss not to mention this, Justin, but at one of the events that you threw in Spain in 2017, I met a woman who I fell in love with and who I ended up trying to move over to Europe, to Germany, to be with. And it didn't work out in the long run, but we became friends. And just recently, she has been helping me through a separate breakup. And it's a beautiful circle. And and I would have never met her if we had both not attended one of your events. And I probably would not be spending that much time in Europe either, if it were not for that. So just one data point for your meaning map there.
Thanks, Blake. So trite. Fall in love at one of Justin Riley's events. It's just
Try
everyone
harder.
does it.
Everyone does it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks.
for people who want to find out about your events or anything else about you, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh yeah. Right now my productions are called Unbound. So you can go to unboundfusion.com for my festivals and events. And my dance teaching, which I'm doing less of now, is justindance.com. You can tell how long I've been doing it since I got justindance.com. But yeah, I'll be teaching in Europe quite a bit. And yeah, the events are quite special.
Yeah, if anyone's listened this far and don't think that, then there's no getting to them. Uh, Justin, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Blake, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.